Welcome back to another episode of the Find Food Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Sam Previtt, and I'm so glad that you are here. Now, we are in the middle of a series, if you will, on the podcast called the 10 Weeks of Diet Culture. And we went 10 weeks back in time leading up to Christmas week. And I thought, what a better way to celebrate the holidays than to talk about bullshit diets. And I've been covering many different diets that you'll see out there. You can peruse through the previous episodes. But today's is going to be a little different. It's still going to cover diet culture bullshit. I can promise you that. But it's not necessarily debunking or breaking down a diet per se, but it's more so breaking down diet myths, if you will, and things that we see all over social media. One of those being food addiction. And I put up a Instagram question box the other day. Thanksgiving was a few short weeks ago. And when people were struggling with their relationship with food and body directly after the holiday, I put up a question box on Instagram stories and I said, let me know how you're struggling. Let me know what your obstacles are. And one of the things I wrote down here is someone said, I'm addicted to sugar. I can't stop eating it. And that really got me thinking how many videos that I see where people are talking about food addiction and being addicted to sugar and getting sugar out of the house. And I think about the one video I did on the Switch Witch, which was back during Halloween time. That went viral and created a lot of controversy because there's this whole camp of people that believe that you should restrict your children of sugar, don't give them access to sugar, take away their Halloween candy. Meanwhile, us weight inclusive intuitive eating professionals are in a very opposite camp where we're saying, expose your children to candy. Let candy be in the house 365 days a year. So candy becomes meh, just candy. So it's really important to dive into food addiction, but then I also want to take this episode down the direction and the path of, okay, I just binged. Now what do I do? Because that was another thing that I put up on an Instagram story that people were really feeling was something they were struggling with, especially after Thanksgiving, and holidays bring up a lot of emotion, of course, with our relationship with food and body, but just being around family members and people entrenched in diet culture. I can't tell you how many hundreds of messages I've received about, sitting at a holiday table with family members that are on Wegovy or Ozempic, and these people won't stop, preaching about it. And if that's not a part of your journey, like how to keep yourself safe. And again, just all of these things can stir up so much. And it's so normal to turn to food to cope. So I want to get into not only the food addiction piece, but okay, I just binged on food. Now what do I do? So we're going to take this in a two-parter, if you will. And I forgot to pull up my Find Food Freedom win of the week, but I got one last night from a previous client. I want to see if I can pull it up quickly because she should be at the top of my DMs. Boom, there it is. So this goes out to Kate. She was a previous client of ours. We absolutely love Kate. We've worked with her for years. So she just sent me this message last night, actually, in the DMs. And I think it's a great one to showcase for our Find Food Freedom win of the week. So she said, my husband and I have been in the Netherlands. On Thanksgiving, we went to a food hall, which is a place with a lot of food booths in one place. We ate all different types of food, falafel, spring rolls, French fries, etc. We just kept ordering food until we were satisfied. We paired all of our food with the local beer, and it was an amazing Thanksgiving that I was so glad I got to enjoy to the fullest with my favorite person in the whole world. So thank you and Julie and the entire Find Food Freedom team. Thank you so much. I still think of you often to this day. Okay. So Kate is a client of ours that we worked with one-on-one, and Julie is our lead dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor on our team. So Kate worked with not only myself, but Julie as well. And I think that's really what this is all about. Is when we look at food freedom, it's being able to remove the obsessive thoughts about food and body image so we can be present and enjoy holidays, right? And not only holidays, every day to the fullest. So thank you, Kate, for sharing that with us. Such a fun and cool Thanksgiving, different than the usual where we're all sitting around eating turkey and mashed potatoes. All right. So let's get into today's episode. I want to bounce off of what I said earlier in the question box. Someone said, I'm addicted to sugar. I can't stop eating it. Now, please know that's all the context I was given. I don't know anything about this person. I don't know anything other than this one line that they gave me. And so I want to dig in deeper and say, okay, if I was sitting with this person in front of me or virtually in front of me as a client, I would ask a lot more questions. But some of the things we need to think about are, one, our bodies cannot be addicted to something that it absolutely needs to survive. Please keep in mind that carbs break down into glucose, which is a fancy word for sugar, which is our brain and our body's number one preferred source of energy. So we are not addicted to it, but there are things that can happen and ways that our behaviors can change that make us feel addicted to food. Now, when someone says this to me, I don't say that to them. I don't say, you're not addicted to food. I ask questions and inquire, but I also want to validate, like, it feels like we're addicted to food when we're in diet culture because we have not been allowed to eat carbs or sugar for an extended period of time. We're also probably starving ourselves and restricting our calories and our carbs and all of these things so low that we are starving and very physically hungry, to which we know a direct correlation is obsessive thoughts about food, feeling out of control around food. So it's going to make us feel like we're addicted. But really, I want to look at, how much are we eating? Are we getting enough? Are we restricting food physically and mentally? And if we can start to check all of those boxes off and make sure all of that is being attended to then say, okay, if we're still feeling out of control around food, what are some other things we can look at? Like emotional eating, right? Like, so if it wasn't physical hunger, if it wasn't the physical and mental restriction, is it that we're using food as a coping mechanism? Which, again, that means you're normal. All humans do it. So then it's recognizing, okay, can we build a skill set or a toolbox, if you will, of additional coping mechanisms in addition to food to help us deal with really strong emotions? Now, I do want to go back to, and there's going to be almost like everything I say, I feel like I can refer you to another podcast episode where we go deeper into this in another way. So for example, you heard me say the words a minute ago, physical versus mental restriction. We need to take a moment. We need to talk about what that is. And I also want you to know that we have an entire podcast episode alone just on that. If you scroll back, you'll see it not too far back in the archive, and it's called Physical versus Mental Restriction. You can click on that and you can listen to it. But for sake of conversation here, it's important to know what I mean when I say that. Physical restriction is the act of physically restricting food, right? So if I say I'm never eating carbohydrates again, I am physically restricting them. I am not allowed to eat pizza. Pizza is not going from my hand to my mouth, chewing, swallowing. I am not eating it, right? I am physically restricting it. Now, a lot of times what happens is when people start to walk an intuitive eating journey or pursue food freedom, they will come to our team and they're saying, but I'm not restricting food. Like, I still feel out of control around food, but I'm not restricting it. Because when we enter this conversation, we know as practitioners and providers that restriction is the number one indicator of binging. If someone is binging on food, if someone is feeling out of control around food, if someone is feeling, air quotes, addicted to food, a lot of times we can find that there is restriction present. But this is where it gets confusing because people say, I'm not restricting. I eat all of the foods. Well, if that's you, if that's a thought that's crossed your mind, I want to invite you to think about this. Do you mentally restrict food? So you're physically eating, you're hand to mouth, chew, swallow, allowing all the different kinds of foods, right? You're eating them. But is this dialogue going on in your head? So let's say you eat pizza or cookies or whatever that thing is. Do you say to yourself, I'm such a bad person for eating this. I can't believe I'm eating this. I cannot believe that I went back for a second. I am disgusting. I should be eating something healthier. I can't believe after all these years, I'm still eating this food. You get the idea here. So this could look like so many different things, right? So many different kinds of dialogue could be going on in the head. But that is mental restriction. Sure, you're physically eating it, but mentally and emotionally, you are not allowing yourself to enjoy the food. And I'm here to tell you that if you are physically or mentally restricting food, you are always going to feel out of control around it. You are always going to feel like you have some sort of addiction or this inability to stop eating foods that you're not allowed to have. And so I really want to stress there is nothing wrong with you if you are restricting food physically and mentally and feel out of control around food. How you're acting around food is what we see in the research. And just like you have learned those behaviors, you can unlearn those behaviors and create a safe and pleasant relationship with food. So that is something I really want to hit home first, because I think coming out of Thanksgiving, I can think of many, many years where I would go into Thanksgiving or any holiday like Christmas, Easter, I mean, you name it. It doesn't even matter what holiday it was. Maybe it was a social event, right? A wedding, like anything, a graduation party, you name it. And I would say, I'm going to be so good today. I would start the day out with some type of movement, like exercise. I would do it solely to burn calories and not like think about how it made my body feel in any way. I was just doing it to punish myself and burn calories. I then would try, when I say be good today, I would not eat all day. Or if I did eat, it was probably like only eating eggs or a salad with grilled chicken, right? Like no carbohydrates. And I would go into that event with this just, oh, I'm going to be so good. I'm not going to eat XYZ. And of course, I was setting myself up to binge because I was starving and I hadn't ate a carbohydrate or anything enjoyable. And so all that's doing is you're lifting up a bow and arrow and you're pulling it back and you're saying, no carbs, no carbs, no carbs. And you hit a breaking point where you say, fuck it. And you let go. And that arrow flies so much further in the opposite direction. And you feel addicted, out of control around food. And I can't tell you how common this is. This is like disordered eating 101. This is the product of diet culture. This is what happens when we restrict food. And I know because I used to be the person that would think, no, you don't understand. If I am allowed to eat all foods, I will never stop eating cake, cookies, pizza, you name it. But I'm here to tell you that the more exposure you have to all food, the less scary it becomes, the less control it has over you, and the more it becomes just food. So here at Find Food Freedom, we do not subscribe to this idea of food addiction because we help people make peace with food. We help people learn how to get in touch with their bodies and really be able to listen to what we want. And I know how foreign that can even sound, because when you've been dieting and following food rules, and maybe you've had an eating disorder, maybe you're a very chronic disordered eater, it can feel very strange when someone says, listen to your body. You're like, what? Or like, if I listen to my body, I'll just eat everything in sight. But I promise you, you were not born into this world thinking that you don't deserve food and hating your body. And so just like those beliefs were taught to you, we can unlearn those beliefs and create a new relationship with food and body. So let's keep going here. Let's kind of take it to the part 2, right? Of I want you to think about, uh-oh, I just binged. Now what do I do? Because I can't tell you how many times people will come to us and say, I ate to a place of feeling physically unpleasant. And like, again, that's a human experience. I'm a registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, certified personal trainer, and I too still eat to places of physical unpleasantness. Now, I can promise you that it is way less frequent than when I was in diet culture, but it is a human experience to eat to those levels. Now, please hear me when I say, when we're talking about the word binge today, and I should have added this earlier in the episode, I am not talking about clinically diagnosed binge eating disorder or binge purge. When I use the word binge, I'm saying eating to a place of feeling physically unpleasant. Like you need to unbutton your pants, you have a stomach ache, you need to lay down. I am not talking about the clinical diagnosed eating disorder of binge eating disorder. So many people come to us with this entire situation that I just explained of the bow and arrow, right? I'm going to be good, be good, be good. Fuck it, let go. Let that arrow fly further in the opposite direction, eat everything in sight, feel physically unpleasant. And then what happens is, because so many of us come from diet culture, we pair that physical unpleasantness with emotional unpleasantness. This is where the guilt and shame comes into play. This is where we've broke our moral compass, if you will, because we think we're a bad person. We're disgusting. We can't believe we would do this. So that's where the thought spiral starts of things I just said, right? You're disgusting. How could you do this? I can't believe you did this again. See, this is why you need to be on a diet. And we take the physical discomfort and unpleasantness and we pair it with mental and emotional discomfort and unpleasantness. And so the first thing I really want to encourage you to do, if you are recognizing, if you can recognize in a moment that, okay, I have just ate to a place of physical unpleasantness. I do not feel comfortable right now. I feel discomfort. I feel uncomfortable. Just recognizing that and being able to do so in a very neutral way of just stating it as a fact is huge. That in and of itself is huge. And so when we're able to do that, then we're also able to uncouple the mental and emotional discomfort that we feel. So I want you to even think about like grabbing a piece of notebook paper and writing down physical on one side, mental, emotional on the other, chop it in half, create 2 columns. And this is where you can, on the physical side, write down what you're feeling physically. Is it a stomach ache? Is it, pains or nausea or, whatever, heartburn, like whatever you're experiencing, write that down on the physical side. And then on the mental, emotional side, I want you to write down that unpleasantness that you're feeling. So that's where it's the thought processes that we talked about, right? I can't believe I'd do this. I'm so disgusting. Why would I do this? I'm such a bad person. Like I feel guilt and shame. Recognizing that one of these columns is physical and one of these is mental, emotional, right? Now, diet culture tells us, just get out of the kitchen. Stop binge eating. Don't eat to a place of physical uncomfortableness or unpleasantness. Well, no shit, right? Nobody wants to feel discomfort. Like, nobody in their right mind is sitting there saying, I can't wait to eat myself into a stomach ache tonight, right? So I think it's really important to recognize that diet culture's tips and tricks don't work. And when we inevitably eat to a place of uncomfortableness or unpleasantness, it's important to have skill sets and a toolbox to pull from so we don't go to the shaming and guilting. Because if we tell ourselves that eating to a place of unpleasantness is bad and makes us a bad person, we're always going to feel guilt and shame in eating experiences. And I'm here to tell you that guilt and shame should never be an ingredient on the plate. And an easy way to determine this is like, if I ask you, do you think you are a bad human for eating, to a place of unpleasantness? Like, does it change your worth? Does it change your character? The majority of people will say no. And then that secondary question saying, okay, it doesn't change your worth. It doesn't change your character, but do you feel guilt and shame? And if the answer is yes, well, we know that guilt is a moral emotion. And so there's a dissonance there, right? There's a cognitive dissonance. Our logic and our belief is not matching up. So instead of diet culture's tips saying, get out of the kitchen, don't eat, like that's not helpful. We have to change the belief systems we hold around eating and around food. So going back to, oh no, right? Uh-oh, I just binged. Now what? First of all, give yourself grace. You're a human. Having mantras that you can pull from that say the following. It could be as simple as this. I am a human being and I'm going to eat to a place of unpleasantness. It could be as simple as this. I am currently feeling unpleasant from eating. I know that this feeling will pass. These things might seem so minute and so simple, but they're true. And anybody listening to this, right? We have all, I know it because you're a human. If you're listening to this, I hope, we've all ate to a place of unpleasantness and we've all gotten through it, right? You may have done this multiple times and have a lot of lived experience with this. So with that, I want you to pull from your lived experience and say, I have discomfort from eating right now. And I know that I just need to let some time pass and this feeling will go away. That can be so helpful instead of letting yourself go down this guilt and shame spiral of I'm a bad person, how could I do this, etc. You can also, again, this would be like more advanced in intuitive eating. And maybe if you're working with a professional, like I said earlier, you can cut a piece of paper in half, write physical on one side, mental, emotional on the other, and start to differentiate between what's going on. Like what physical symptoms are you experiencing? What mental and emotional things are you kind of spiraling with? And then that next step would be, okay, we're going to redirect the negative self-talk. We're going to redirect the mental and emotional unpleasantness. But this is something that if we're very new to intuitive eating, if we're very new to this idea, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing these things without professional guidance and support. But first off, I would say give yourself grace. Recognize that you are a human being. You are going to eat to a place of unpleasantness. That doesn't make you a bad person whatsoever. And with time, that feeling will go away. You do not need to go to the gym and burn it off. You do not need to go walk it off. If anything, if you're very physically uncomfortable, can you find a distraction, right? Can it be turning on your favorite show, calling a friend if it's not too physically painful? Like, are there ways that we can distract ourselves to let the time pass, to recognize, oh, my body is doing what it needs to do. It's digesting the food. I'm going to move on from here. Now, as we come out of feeling physically unpleasant from food, again, this is more of an advanced intuitive eating reflection, if you will. But we look at every single eating experience as an opportunity to learn about ourselves. So anytime I would eat to a place of physically being unpleasant, I would look back and say, what's going on? Now, as you become more comfortable with this, as your skills fine tune with intuitive eating, you're going to be able to do this like right in the moment, not think twice and roll with it. But that might feel really hard if you're still really beating yourself up for feeling unpleasant to do this in the moment. So for some people, it might be after a binge saying, okay, what's going on here? Can we put our detective hat on and get curious about why did this happen? One, what did I eat earlier in the day? Did I have enough food or was I really freaking hungry? And so when I finally got in front of food, I felt out of control, which is totally normal. Was it that I was coming off of a diet or restricting myself, right? And then I got in front of food that I haven't been allowed to have for an extended period of time. And I just lost all air quotes control, right? I felt out of control and had an urgency to eat this food and ate past a point of physical pleasantness. Was it, and this is where as you're advanced in your intuitive eating journey, you might notice you're at a social gathering, you're at a family event, whatever it is, and there is some dish there that is so freaking good that you're noticing, okay, I'm starting to get pretty full here, but I don't care because that food is fucking delicious. I don't think I'm going to have, I don't know how to make this food. This is a very special dish. I don't know the next time I'm going to be able to eat it. So I'm eating past fullness and I don't care. I know I'm not a bad person. I don't care. I just want to eat this food. And that you may check back with yourself like, oh yeah, that's exactly what happened. And that's fine too. And so there's so many different ways this can occur. And I think that's the nuance to intuitive eating. That's the nuance to nutrition, is that there's not a one size fits all of like, okay, I just ate to a place of physical unpleasantness. Check this box, right? Like there's so much curiosity that needs to come in and questioning and observation from a neutral perspective. But I hope by listening to this episode, you've been able to get what serves you, and then you can leave the rest behind, because everybody is at a different point in their journey. And some of the things I'm saying are going to really resonate with some people and go over the heads of others. And that is totally okay. So take what serves you and leave the rest behind. All right. So as we wrap today's episode, I want to encourage you to do a couple different things. One, if you enjoyed this episode, if you found it helpful, please, please, please rate, review, subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Let us know. Let us know what you want to hear more of, but leave a honest review. We would love to hear more. And for those of you who felt like I've been speaking directly to you, and this was something that you really needed to hear today, then I want to invite you to go to findfoodfreedomresources.com. Again, that's findfoodfreedomresources.com. And over there, you're going to get a ton of different resources. You'll see a free training. You'll see different monthly master classes we have. You'll see different forms of support. So there are truly like endless resources there. So again, I'm going to give you the same advice. Take what serves you, leave the rest behind. But if you feel like you need more after this podcast episode, again, you can go to findfoodfreedomresources.com. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week.